There comes a moment in life when the weight of it all becomes unbearable. For Arian, that moment came on a cold, rainy night. He sat in his dimly lit apartment, surrounded by the silence that only deep despair can bring. The table in front of him was cluttered with unpaid bills, overdue notices, and a rejected job application, a haunting reminder of his struggles. Arian thought about how he'd ended up here. The dreams he once had seemed like distant memories, overshadowed by years of bad choices, self-doubt, and procrastination. As rain tapped against the window, tears began to stream down his face. For the first time in years, he said aloud, "I can't live like this anymore. Things must change." That declaration wasn't just a cry for help. It was a decision, a turning point. Change begins with confronting the truth, and Arian knew it. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. The person looking back at him wasn't just tired, he was broken. Arian's excuses for his failures played in his mind like a broken record. "It's not my fault. I'll try tomorrow. I'm just unlucky." But deep down, he knew the truth. The real problem wasn't the world, it was him. He hadn't just avoided pain, he'd avoided responsibility. That day, he decided to face the pain instead of running from it. Arian picked up a notebook and wrote down everything he felt, his regrets, fears, and failures. Each word felt like a weight lifted from his chest. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the pain fully, knowing it was the only way to heal. With his notebook still open, Arian began to list the things he wanted to change. The list was long: his career, health, relationships, finances. Everything needed fixing. It was overwhelming, but he reminded himself that every great journey begins with a single step. Arian decided to start small. The next morning, he woke up an hour earlier than usual. He spent that hour journaling, reflecting, and planning his day. He set 3 small, achievable goals: to apply for one job, to go for a 15-minute walk, and to cook a healthy meal. By the end of the day, he had accomplished all 3. They were small wins, but they felt monumental. Arian realized that even the smallest actions could ignite a sense of hope. As Arian started making changes, resistance came from every direction. His inner critic whispered, "You'll fail again." Friends who had grown used to his old ways mocked his new determination. "Why bother?" they said. "You've tried before, and look where you are now." Each comment stung, but Arian held on to one thought: staying the same costs too much. He began to distance himself from negativity. Instead of scrolling through social media, he read books on personal development. Instead of complaining, he focused on gratitude. The resistance was relentless, but so was Arian. Every day he reminded himself why he started. He wasn't just fighting for a better life. He was fighting for his future. Progress came slowly but steadily. Arian landed a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him a sense of purpose. He started exercising 3 times a week, feeling his body grow stronger with each session. He opened a savings account and began putting away small amounts. Each small victory felt like a spark, reigniting the fire within him. Arian learned to celebrate these wins, no matter how insignificant they seemed. One day, as he looked back at his journal, he realized how far he'd come. The man who once felt hopeless was now building momentum. For the first time in years, Arian felt something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. Just when Arian thought he was on the right path, life tested him again. A sudden medical expense wiped out his savings. The bookstore cut his hours due to low sales, leaving him scrambling to make ends meet. For a moment, it felt like all his progress had been for nothing. He sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of defeat. But then he remembered the words he'd written in his journal: "Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever." Arian refused to give up. He doubled down on his efforts, picking up odd jobs and cutting unnecessary expenses. The setback was painful, but it became a reminder of his resilience. During one of his part-time gigs, Aryan met an older man named Kabir. Kabir had a warmth about him, a confidence that came from experience. As they talked, Aryan learned that Kabir had once been in a similar situation, broke, lost, and full of self-doubt. But Kabir had turned his life around, building a successful business and a fulfilling life. Kabir took Aryan under his wing, sharing not just advice, but also belief. "Success isn't about avoiding pain," Kabir said. "It's about using it to fuel your growth." For Aryan, Kabir became more than a mentor. He became a symbol of what was possible. With Kabir's guidance, Aryan began to see the world differently. Challenges became opportunities to grow stronger. Failures became lessons in what not to do. Aryan started practicing mindfulness, focusing on the present moment, rather than worrying about the past or future. He replaced self-doubt with affirmations and visualization, imagining the life he wanted to create. The power to rewrite his story, Aryan realized, had been within him all along. The shift in mindset didn't just change his actions, it changed his entire outlook on life. As Aryan transformed, the people around him began to notice. His friends, who once mocked his efforts, started seeking his advice. His newfound confidence inspired his younger siblings to pursue their dreams. Aryan's journey became a ripple effect, touching the lives of everyone he encountered. He wasn't just changing his own life, he was creating a legacy of hope and resilience. For Aryan, this was the most rewarding part of his journey. The fire he'd reignited within himself was now spreading, lighting the way for others. Years later, Aryan stood on a stage, sharing his story with hundreds of people. The boy who once cried himself to sleep had become a man who inspired others to rise above their pain. As he looked out at the audience, he felt a sense of fulfillment he'd never known. The pain that once consumed him had become the foundation of his strength. Aryan ended his speech with the words that had carried him through his darkest days. Sometimes, life demands change. Not because it's easy, but because staying the same costs too much. If you're tired of the pain, rise and rewrite your story.